are lucky enough to spend precious time each year in Aberdeenshire. And finally, because 10 years ago, I received the great honour of being installed as Chancellor of this very special university.
From the very beginning, Camilla's path to becoming queen was clouded in controversy. Unlike the fairy tale coronations of the past, hers came with whispers, raised eyebrows, and a long shadow cast by history. For decades, she was seen not as the rightful partner of King Charles, but as the outsider who forced her way into the heart of the monarchy. Many believed her title would forever remain consort, a reminder of her contested place in the royal family. But then came the rumors. Staff and insiders began to speak quietly about unusual happenings at her private residence in Wiltshire, a sprawling countryside estate where she has often hidden away from the relentless eyes of the public. Strange stories emerged, claims that certain royal heirlooms, once presumed lost to time, were somehow resurfacing behind those closed doors. At first, the whispers were dismissed as gossip. After all, the royal family has always attracted scandal, and Camilla's name has long been tied to the most painful chapters of Charles' life. Yet this was different. When a servant stumbled upon something that should never have been there, an object tied directly to the late Queen Elizabeth II, the rumor solidified into an accusation. The discovery ignited fury inside palace walls, sparking confrontations that could not be ignored, and suddenly, the world was left asking the same chilling question. What exactly was uncovered in Queen Camilla's private estate, and what does it reveal about her past? Stay with us. The answers may shock you. Raymill House, tucked away in the quiet countryside of Wiltshire, has long been Queen Camilla's escape from the suffocating duties of royal life. Purchased in the mid-1990s after her divorce, it was meant to be her sanctuary, a place where she could laugh with close friends, host family gatherings, and retreat from the press that never stopped chasing her. For years, the estate carried with it the charm of a private refuge, far removed from the rigid walls of Buckingham Palace. But what was once a peaceful retreat quickly turned into the scene of an unfolding scandal. During a small charity reception held at the estate, one of the newer staff members noticed something odd. While tidying a guest room, she spotted a small item lying carelessly on the floor. Thinking it was just a misplaced trinket, she set it gently on the dresser, expecting the housekeeper to return it to its rightful spot. Only later did the staff realize this was no simple ornament. It was a royal heirloom, an item recorded as missing from the royal vaults, one that once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II herself. The realization spread like wildfire through the household, and it wasn't long before Princess Anne, who was present at the event, stormed into the room. Witnesses recalled hearing Anne's raised voice echo down the hallway. She accused Camilla outright, calling her a thief in front of staff, guests, and even security. Camilla, visibly shaken, tried to calm her sister-in-law, but Anne's fury was unrelenting. She declared that Camilla might wear a crown, but she would never truly be a queen. The confrontation left the estate rattled. What began as an intimate charity event had spiraled into a scandal that no amount of royal discretion could bury. And this was only the beginning. The charity event carried on as if nothing had happened, but everyone inside Raymill House knew the atmosphere had changed. Guests smiled politely, staff carried trays of champagne, and conversations continued. But behind the scenes, the tension was unbearable. The confrontation between Anne and Camilla was impossible to ignore, and word of the missing heirloom spread quickly among those present. By evening, a private family meeting was called. Behind the locked doors of the estate's drawing room, King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Camilla gathered to address the discovery. Accounts from staff stationed nearby described raised voices, with Anne once again insisting that Camilla had no right to keep anything belonging to their late mother. Charles, visibly distressed, urged calm, but his efforts were drowned out by Anne's fury. Security was discreetly instructed to carry out a quiet search of the estate. Servants moved nervously from room to room, opening cabinets and drawers under strict orders not to alarm the guests. Hours later, nothing more was uncovered. Only the single heirloom remained as evidence, but for many inside the family, that was already too much. When William left the room after only a few minutes, it was clear he wanted no part in the argument. Observers noted his stony expression, as though the incident had confirmed long-standing doubts about Camilla's place in the monarchy. Charles, meanwhile, faced the impossible task of balancing loyalty to his wife with the deepening resentment of his sister and son. No official statement was ever made. The royal family's silence was as deliberate as it was predictable. Yet the fallout could not be contained forever. What had begun as a whispered rumor was now an open wound within the monarchy, and Anne was determined never to let it heal. To understand why Princess Anne reacted with such intensity, one must look back decades. The hostility between her and Camilla didn't begin with a missing heirloom. It was rooted in tangled relationships and years of bruised pride. In the early 1970s, Anne was romantically linked to a young cavalry officer named Andrew Parker Bowles. Their relationship was passionate but complicated. Andrew was Catholic, and strict royal protocol made marriage impossible. Though they eventually drifted apart, Anne never fully severed ties with him. Their bond lingered in the background, a reminder of what might have been. Not long after, Andrew married Camilla Shand. At first, Anne appeared unfazed, but whispers soon suggested otherwise. There were rumors that Anne and Andrew maintained their closeness even after his marriage, and some even alleged their relationship hadn't entirely ended. If true, that meant Camilla's presence wasn't just inconvenient, it was personal. Anne had every reason to see Camilla as an intruder, and when Charles later fell deeply for Camilla, the resentment sharpened. What might have been dismissed as family tension turned into outright rivalry once Camilla's affair with Charles became impossible to hide. Anne, fiercely protective of her brother and the monarchy, despised how Camilla destabilized both. Over the years, their clashes became legendary inside royal circles. Publicly, the two women maintained composure. Privately, arguments were frequent, often leaving Charles stuck between his sister's loyalty and his lover's ambitions. By the time Camilla officially joined the royal family, the bitterness had hardened into something irreversible. So when Anne spotted that missing heirloom inside Ray Mill House, she saw it not as a mistake, but as proof. Confirmation of every suspicion she had ever held about Camilla. To Anne, it wasn't simply an object. It was a symbol of betrayal, another reminder that Camilla had taken too much, from too many, for far too long. And the coronation that followed would only deepen that wound. When Queen Elizabeth II passed, the world expected a carefully managed transition. Charles would take the throne, and Camilla, despite her turbulent past, would quietly assume the role of queen consort. Even those uneasy with her presence believed this compromise was the late queen's way of softening the blow. The word consort was meant to remind the nation, and perhaps the family, that Camilla's place was secondary. But during the coronation banquet, the script changed. To the shock of those gathered, Charles announced that his wife would not be addressed as queen consort. Instead, she would simply be known as Queen Camilla. The words seemed to hang in the air, reshaping the atmosphere of the evening. What should have been a joyous moment for the monarchy instantly fractured into whispers and tense glances. For Camilla, the change was a triumph. Years of persistence and public rehabilitation had finally paid off. She smiled graciously as congratulations poured in. Yet across the room, Anne's fury was visible. Rising from her seat, she openly voiced what many were thinking. This was not what her mother had wanted. The late queen's wishes, spoken clearly on her platinum jubilee, had been disregarded. Anne's words were sharp, cutting through the formal cheer like a blade. "She will never be a true queen," Anne reportedly declared, echoing the very sentiment she had hurled inside Ray Mill House. Murmurs spread quickly among the assembled royals and dignitaries. Though most held their tongues, it was clear many sided with Anne's interpretation of their mother's wishes. From that moment, Camilla's title was not just a matter of ceremony, it was a symbol of defiance, a flashpoint that divided the family and deepened old resentments. For Anne, the coronation was yet another betrayal. For Camilla, it was validation. And for Charles, it was a decision that would haunt him long after the banquet ended. Long before she wore a crown, Camilla Shand was already crafting the reputation that would follow her into the palace walls. Born on July 17, 1947, into a wealthy family in London, she grew up surrounded by privilege. Her father, Bruce Shand, was a decorated officer and Vice Lord Lieutenant of East Sussex, while her mother, Rosalind, descended from aristocratic circles. Camilla's upbringing was polished, with fine schools, horse riding, and summers spent in the countryside shaping her early years. Friends from her youth often described her as confident, charming, and unafraid of attention. She had a playful wit that drew people in, along with a self-assuredness uncommon in young women of her era. At one point, she even boasted of her family's colorful history, claiming her great-grandmother, Alice Keppel, had been the mistress of King Edward VII. To some, it was just cheeky storytelling. To others, it hinted at a pattern that seemed destined to repeat. After finishing her schooling in England, Camilla studied French in Paris before returning as a debutante in 1965. It was here she began to navigate the same elite social circles that orbited the royals. By the late 1960s, she had captured the attention of Andrew Parker Bowles, a handsome cavalry officer. Their on-again, off-again romance was far from stable, yet it tethered her to the upper-class world, where titles mattered as much as love. Then, in 1970, everything changed. At a polo match, Camilla met Prince Charles for the first time. They clicked immediately, bonding over shared humor and love of the countryside. Their friendship blossomed quickly into romance. For a brief period, Charles was captivated by her presence, her warmth, her charm, her easy laughter. But the timing was all wrong. Naval duties pulled him away, leaving their relationship vulnerable to the very man Camilla had never quite let go of, Andrew Parker Bowles. This tangled web of love and loyalty was only the beginning of a saga that would reshape the royal family for decades. By the late 1970s, Camilla's life seemed settled. She had married Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973, and together they raised 2 children. Yet her bond with Charles had never truly faded. What began as a youthful romance had matured into something far more complicated, an enduring connection that would threaten the stability of the monarchy itself. Charles, meanwhile, was under immense pressure to find a suitable bride. The heir to the throne could not remain unmarried forever, and Camilla, as a divorced woman, was already considered unsuitable by royal standards. Enter Lady Diana Spencer, young, aristocratic, and by all appearances, the perfect match for Britain's future king. Charles and Diana's courtship seemed innocent, even sweet. The press adored the shy 19-year-old, whose every glance at Charles was portrayed as a fairy tale in the making. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming before vows were even exchanged. Days before the royal wedding, Diana stumbled across a bracelet Charles had commissioned for Camilla, engraved with their secret nicknames, Fred and Gladys. The discovery shattered her illusions. Though the marriage went ahead in 1981, the gesture was a haunting reminder that her husband's heart was not entirely hers. For the first few years, Diana tried to play her role as the radiant Princess of Wales. She bore 2 sons, William in 1982, Harry in 1984, and won over the public with her warmth. Yet Charles grew distant. Diana's sudden global popularity overshadowed him, fueling resentment. While the world cheered the people's princess, Charles found solace elsewhere, back in Camilla's company. Their meetings became more frequent. Highgrove, Charles's country estate, was only a short drive from Camilla's home, making their secret rendezvous nearly effortless. Friends warned Diana, but she struggled to confront the reality. How could she accuse the future king? How could she compete with a woman who had never truly left his side? By the mid-1980s, the marriage was unraveling. Charles and Diana were rarely seen happy together, while whispers of his affair with Camilla grew louder. For Diana, the betrayal was not only personal, it was public. A humiliation played out before millions. For Camilla, it was a quiet victory. She had reclaimed Charles's attention, no matter the cost. And soon, Diana would decide she could no longer remain silent. Diana's silence eventually broke. Tired of enduring the humiliation, she began secretly recording her experiences for journalist Andrew Morton. Through whispered accounts and hidden tapes, she revealed a marriage suffocated by infidelity, loneliness, and betrayal. When Diana, her true story was published in 1992, the world was stunned. Behind the palace walls, the fairy tale was nothing but pain. As if the book weren't explosive enough, scandal soon followed. In 1993, a leaked phone call between Charles and Camilla rocked the monarchy. In it, Charles joked about wanting to live inside her trousers as a tampon. The crude exchange, dubbed Tampon Gate, became one of the most humiliating episodes in royal history. For the public, it was confirmation of everything Diana had confessed. Then came her most unforgettable moment. In 1995, Diana sat down with the BBC's Martin Bashir for a panorama interview watched by millions. Calm but devastatingly honest, she admitted, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." With those words, she named Camilla as the other woman and exposed the truth that could no longer be denied. The monarchy had been shaken, but the storm was far from over. In August 1997, tragedy struck. Princess Diana, alongside Dodi Fayed, was killed in a car crash in Paris while fleeing a pack of relentless paparazzi. The news sent shockwaves across the globe. Britain mourned its people's princess, and grief quickly turned to anger. Many blamed Charles, and by extension Camilla, believing Diana would still be alive had her marriage not been destroyed. For Queen Elizabeth, the moment was decisive. She urged Charles to end his relationship with Camilla for the sake of the monarchy's survival. But Charles refused. Against the tide of public outrage, he clung to Camilla, insisting she was the woman he truly loved. It was a defiant move that deepened the rift between him and his people. For years, Camilla remained a deeply unpopular figure. She was shunned from public ceremonies, avoided by the Queen, and loathed by Diana's supporters. Yet Charles persisted. He gradually introduced her into his official life, allowing her presence to feel less like an affair and more like a partnership. By 2005, nearly 8 years after Diana's death, the Queen reluctantly gave her blessing for Charles and Camilla to marry. It was not a fairy tale wedding, it was a compromise. And while the public slowly adjusted, whispers of disapproval never truly went away. After years of being branded the villain, Camilla began the long process of reshaping her image. She threw herself into charity work, supporting victims of domestic abuse, promoting literacy, and championing children's causes. Slowly, headlines softened. The press that once mocked her as the other woman now painted her as a dutiful partner. Even Queen Elizabeth, once fiercely opposed, acknowledged Camilla's loyalty. In her Platinum Jubilee speech, the Queen expressed her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. That wish came true in 2023. At Westminster Abbey, Camilla was crowned alongside Charles, her journey from scandal to throne seemingly complete. To the world, she was no longer the outsider. She was queen, and yet, doubts remain. For Princess Anne, for William, and for many who adored Diana, the memory of betrayal never fades. The discovery at Raymil House only deepened suspicion, proof in their eyes that Camilla still takes what was never hers. So the question lingers: has Queen Camilla truly earned her crown, or is she still living in the shadow of everything she claimed? Tell us, what do you think she's hiding? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.